What is patriarchy? Let me tell you something people get wrong about patriarchy. It's not about men hating women. It's about a system that teaches men to dominate and teaches everyone else to adapt. Patriarchy is a social, political, and economic system where power, authority, and resources are organized around male dominance. Not individual behavior, not personality, a structure. And it's one of the oldest global hierarchies in human history, older than capitalism, colonialism, and because it's ancient, to some, it feels normal. How does patriarchy show up? Patriarchy decides whose voice carries weight, whose anger is justified, whose safety is prioritized, whose careers are accelerated, who does unpaid emotional labor, who's expected to sacrifice, and who's expected to lead. It lives in grammar, tradition, family roles, pay gaps, jokes, laws, and expectations. And it can show up in relationships when women are nagging but men are setting boundaries. It can show up in workplaces when men are leaders and women are too much. It shows up in society when a woman's safety is her responsibility and a man's behavior is boys will be boys. People don't see it because patriarchy benefits men even when they don't ask for it. It trains women to normalize things that harm them. The word for this is gendered conditioning. When cultures teach us to perform our gender in a way that maintains the hierarchy. Men are taught dominance, women are taught endurance. That's not nature, that's training. But patriarchy doesn't just limit women, it emotionally starves men. It teaches men don't cry, don't talk, don't depend, don't feel, don't ask for help. All of these things. This is why so many men struggle with intimacy, communication, and vulnerability. The system gives men power, but strips them of emotional literacy. So remember, patriarchy isn't just a feeling, it's a system, it's a framework. And once you see the framework, you can't unsee the way it shapes relationships, workplaces, and culture.
So here we are, y'all, about to head into March 2026. And as we head into March 2026, I'm seeing different groups of people just waking up left and right. Like there are groups of white people who are waking up and talking about the history of black people, like the biblical history with black people in it. I'm seeing groups of men, white, black, Indian, Chinese, talking about the patriarchy and how it isn't good for us and how we need a matriarchy and how we need to protect women and kids. I'm just seeing people just becoming woke. And you know that the current administration, MAGA, has termed the coin woke as something that is bad. And I don't think they're going to be able to stop it. People are just tired. People are tired of what's been going on. People don't want to go back anymore. People see them erasing history and trying to repeat history. Like they're literally like using Hitler's playbook, and then they made their own called Project 2025. And people see it. People know history. They think everybody in America is just dumb and everybody in the rest of the world is dumb. But no, once you wake up and see what they're doing, like you can't be put back to sleep. There are men out here who are pushing for the patriarchy to fall because they know that it is harming men, women, and children. So basically, the men are becoming more feminist. That is all a feminist is. Feminist doesn't want anybody to be hurt. They know that men are hurt in this system. Now, men are just now starting to speak up about how and why the patriarchy is hurting them. And they can't be at their best, at their healthiest in this system with the 1% of rich men at the top controlling everybody and trying to force everybody to do what they want. And nobody else can have a life or enjoy life or even get a break until we die. So let's get into what the men are saying, y'all. And I'll be back later.
Imagine if I saved a woman from a burning building. You'd call me a hero, right? But what if you found out that I was the one who started that fire? Now I'm not such a hero, am I? This is the patriarchy. This is what men mean when they say they are the protectors of women. They want to be praised for being the solution to the problems that they created. It's all about looking for a way to feel important. And in this twisted dynamic, women are expected to be grateful for receiving protection they never should have needed in the first place. Men are the problem. Instead of realizing this, they get defensive. Why should another man have to die protecting a woman from a man when that man could just not attack her in the first place? You've created a situation where men's lives are being wasted, all because some men can't stop being violent. Prevention is far better than heroic rescues. I'm not saying that women or any other vulnerable group don't deserve protection. When men get defensive about the idea that men should simply stop being violent, they overlook a critical point. Men's lives are being wasted in the process of defending women from harm that men themselves initiate.
Okay, freaks, here's one for the men. It is clear, now with the release of the Epstein files, that patriarchy turns powerful men into monsters. Not just powerful men, it turns all men into monsters, because the child hating is common. That's not something that is reserved for those in the upper echelons of this fucked up society. You can find videos here online of children falling over, and the comment section is full of people just reveling in that and wishing nothing but more harm upon those children. That's fucked. What the fuck is up with that? Why is that so fucking normal? It's disgusting. Yeah? And it's endemic. And that is indicative of the fucking rot at the core of our humanity that is produced by living in this society. If you disagree with what they did, we need to have a fucking conversation about what it means to be a man in this society. Because I'm not okay with my body, my gender, producing that in this fucking world. I don't want to be associated with that. I didn't choose to be born in this body. I don't want this very fact to connect me to those disgusting monsters. So if we're not having a talk about it, if you're just being like, no, it's fine. It's fine. I didn't do it. It's fine. You're a fucking idiot. And we need to get on top of this because we need to stop this from happening.
I hate women for waking up before you. Women are now understanding the world that they live in. And the response to that is to either pick a better man or stay single. Your complaints are that it's too expensive, you can't afford it, and work is too hard. And your complaints are valid, but your anger is misplaced. It shouldn't be so hard for you to make a decent living. It shouldn't be so hard for you to find a job to make a decent living. You can't then be mad at a woman because she doesn't want to suffer alongside you. Women have every right to a decent life, and so do you, but not at the expense of a woman. So if you're going to be mad at something, be mad at the system that makes you so poor, that makes you so miserable. You're right that it shouldn't be so hard, but it's not on women to make it easier for you.
You just said that a huge amount of men between the age of 15 and 50 will not pass on their genes.
We told women to choose better men, and when they couldn't find better men, they chose no one. What's the issue? It's almost as if there aren't enough better men.
There is a male loneliness epidemic, but we're not going to solve it unless we get to the root of the problem, which is the patriarchy and misogyny. When I was an evangelical pastor, I remember one prominent speaker teaching us on how to disciple men. And he said, men aren't like women. You know, women, you can go get coffee. They like to chat face to face. But men don't do that. They need an activity. You go fishing or hunting, and in the duck blind, a man might open up, but don't make it weird. And listen, on the one hand, there is wisdom in meeting someone where they're at. If men struggle with vulnerability and looking someone in the eye, then sure, opening up while doing a sports is better than nothing. But what bothers me about this is that in conservative or evangelical spaces, this is not seen as a skill problem to be overcome. They say this is how men are. Women are relationship-oriented and men are action-oriented. But what they fail to see is that this is how men are socialized under the patriarchy. Men are taught that emotional skills and vulnerability are feminine. And for an alpha bro, nothing is worse than having the characteristics of a girl. From childhood, they've been told not to throw like a girl or run like a girl or dress like a girl. And this misogyny also creates homophobia. To look feminine is to look gay, and many of these men are so obsessed with not looking gay that they settle for deep loneliness. Right-wing podcast bros and so-called masculinity experts see this as a great opportunity to recruit. But they don't help men have more and better relationships. They just help them be angry, usually at women and minorities. But here's the good news. Men are just as capable of having real, deep, emotional connections as anyone. They've been told that those skills are feminine or gay, and that patriarchal thinking hurts men. It traps them in small boxes that don't acknowledge their full humanity. But when we acknowledge the patriarchal thinking that caused men to avoid those skills in the first place, we can do something about it. So, it's time to skill up, bros, and learn how to look our friends in the eyeballs and open up our hearts. I believe in us.
Underestimate the female ego. The male ego is presumed, which is why they hate men so much. They presume a man has a gigantic ego. They hate this about a man because a man is right. A man is right to have an ego. We made everything.
Women made men. Dismantling patriarchy is not about getting rid of men. It is not about eradicating men. It is about holding men accountable to the ways that patriarchy perpetuates violence against everyone. Not only does it perpetuate violence against everyone, patriarchy also perpetuates violence within oneself. Patriarchy actually hurts us all. Dismantling patriarchy is about divesting from patriarchy. It is not about eradicating men. You could clearly see that I'm still a man. You could clearly see that I'm still presenting as a man, presenting mask. It is not about eradicating men. It is about divesting from patriarchy.
Maturing is realizing, and yes, this is going to be a bit hard to swallow like usual. The patriarchy impacts men and women both. I mean, obviously, I think it impacts women much more, but it also impacts men, and I don't think men realize that in the way that they should. Like, this system has conditioned us to, like, as men to value certain things, and as men to be, like, certain things, like a breadwinner. You gotta lead, you gotta this, you gotta that. But, like, that's also damaging us now in this current time when women are getting more independence, women are becoming more financially independent. The values, the things they look for in a man, like back then, these arranged marriages, they were forced marriages. I'm not talking about like your parents' generation, but before. The reason a woman would marry a man back then is because he would provide that financial security, because women were probably not even allowed to go to school, do a job, do this, do that. They were just supposed to take care of the kids because that's their job. So try to understand, like, you're holding these like old, like, you know, values, but they're not going to benefit you now in 2025 as a man. You know, we have to change. We have to show that emotional side of ourselves. We have to be vulnerable. We have to be loving. We have to be caring. We can't just, like, try to be Batman, suppress all our emotions except for anger and make money. That's not what a man is in 2025. If you want a loving relationship and a marriage that is going to last until you die, because I know a lot of you love marriage, right? You want a wife, right? You want a wife? Then do this. Change some of your values.
I think what the Epstein files are forcing us to see is that anything that is pure and well-intentioned and kind in this world comes from women. And even the men that we know in our lives that are good men, that treat women with respect, that are kind and loving and patient, they are that way because they had sisters growing up or because they had a mother that instilled those values in them. Or in the rare case where it was a father that instilled those values, it's because he had an incredible mother. And what I'm trying to say is that the systems that are in place that allowed the Epstein files to come to fruition have been in place for thousands of years. And if reshaping policy or putting the right men in office was going to change anything, it would have happened a long time ago. Patriarchy on a long enough timeline equals Jeffrey Epstein. Men have repeatedly shown what we will do when we have all of the power. We control, we dominate, we exploit, and we avoid justice. It's pretty simple. If we had a power structure made up of women and word got out that one of them was harming children, women would squash that shit immediately. And I mean fucking immediately. I think the solution to everything we see going on right now is to let women take the lead. Men have been giving it a shake for 2,000 years and look where we're at.
Every right as a man to be angry right now. We were given and inherited a system that doesn't work. We were studying out of the wrong textbook. We did the things we were supposed to do, and we got it wrong. We got it wrong. And so here's the problem now. Our anger warranted. Directing it toward women, though, No. It is not women's fault that they are no longer upholding a flawed, garbage social contract that says they were supposed to be treated subserviently. That is not their fault, my friends. What is going on here is the systems have failed us. What you're feeling now, that you have put in blood, sweat, and tears into trying to make a life worth living, that you were told that life had to be harder than it should be so that people could keep mistreating you and not compensating you and not valuing you, there's rage there. Oh, for sure. But that rage in no way should be directed towards women. Not towards your moms, not your sisters, not your wives, not your girlfriends, not the women who spurned you or left you. It's a collective failure, but it will become our individual faults on top of a collective failure if we can't direct our energy appropriately. You want to be a protector? You want to be a leader? This is your opportunity. Direct all of that anger, all of that rage, all of that frustration, and channel it into listening.
And we're going to have a lot of men who are disillusioned, that become incels, find themselves in pockets of the internet, are resentful, all those kinds of things. But should society intervene to course correct that? Should we put systems in place to make sure that those men meet partners?
Oh dear. Where do we begin with this one? It almost sounds as if the current system that's been put in place is not benefiting men. I said this a while ago and I'm going to repeat it. Patriarchy is going to end up hurting men more than it does women. Because ever since women have been liberating themselves from the patriarchy, fighting the disadvantages that they face, making more choices for themselves, having more autonomy, facing less control for men, they have decided to do what they think is worthwhile for them. They are choosing what they want in a partner. It's no longer men that get to decide a woman's worth and value. That's how it used to be. Women are not standing for that anymore, and now it's men who are complaining. And to say that we should be intervening somehow and putting systems in place, what are you suggesting? Handmaid's Tale? This is really, really hurtful to see that on one of the biggest, if not the biggest podcasts out there, that two people are talking about how they can support the incel community. Not to mention that the idea of passing on your genes has always been from a sense of ownership anyway. Men are not entitled to have their genes passed on. Men are not entitled to be in relationships. Men are not entitled to have sex with women. The problem is that there are other clips within this interview about how he is explaining that sex is something that is needed and not necessarily something that is wanted. When you place that opinion, because it's not a fact, on men and women, you are still saying that men are entitled to have something that they don't already have. We can survive without having sex in a relationship. If women are saying what their standards are in a relationship or for a potential partner, it's up to men to decide whether or not they want to adhere to those standards or just accept the fact that they won't be in a relationship with a woman. And isn't it interesting how the turns have tabled? Men making the decisions for women, men telling women where their value should be placed. And now that women are actually saying what they're looking for, it's men that don't like it because they are losing control. Control that they should never have had in the first place. What baffles me is that men have a choice, believe it or not. They have a choice to better themselves. They have a choice to improve in certain aspects of their life, whether it's their personality or the things that they want to strive to be in the future. But instead, they'd rather still try and control women and tell them that their standards are ridiculous. And so if I was a man right now looking for a partner and these were my concerns, why won't you try and look inwards rather than trying to see what women should be doing differently? We also have to acknowledge that the conversation is very heavily on the way that men's genes won't be passed down. What about the woman's genes? Like, this surely can't be just a problem for men. If genes are going to get passed down, you need to be able to have a baby for your genes to be passed down. But of course, it has to be about men. It has to be about men's needs. It has to be about men's wants, and not necessarily how women are having much more freedom than they ever used to have, and men don't like it. The male loneliness epidemic, whether you believe it exists or not, there's enough men out there that thinks it does, is just natural selection. This is an extremely harmful conversation that was had about how they think that we need to find solutions and ways for men's genes to be passed on just purely because they think they're entitled to. And then trying to compare it to illnesses and diseases and saying that it's about mass extinction is literally just pushing the idea that women are there to be incubators. This type of conversation, unfortunately, screams control and entitlement.
And we're going to have a lot of men who are disillusioned, that become incels find themselves in pockets of the internet, are resentful, all those kinds of things. But should society intervene to course correct that? Should we put systems in place to make sure that those men meet partners?
Oh dear. Where do we begin with this one? It almost sounds as if the current system that's been put in place is not benefiting men. I said this a while ago and I'm going to repeat it. Patriarchy is going to end up hurting men more than it does women. Because ever since women have been liberating themselves from the patriarchy, fighting the disadvantages that they face, making more choices for themselves, having more autonomy, facing less control for men, they have decided to do what they think is worthwhile for them. They are choosing what they want in a partner. It's no longer men that get to decide a woman's worth and value. That's how it used to be. Women are not standing for that anymore, and now it's men who are complaining. And to say that we should be intervening somehow and putting systems in place, what are you suggesting? Handmaid's Tale? This is really, really hurtful to see that on one of the biggest, if not the biggest podcasts out there, that two people are talking about how they can support the incel community. Not to mention that the idea of passing on your genes has always been from a sense of ownership anyway. Men are not entitled to have their genes passed on. Men are not entitled to be in relationships. Men are not entitled to have sex with women. The problem is that there are other clips within this interview about how he is explaining that sex is something that is needed and not necessarily something that is wanted. When you place that opinion, because it's not a fact, on men and women, you are still saying that men are entitled to have something that they don't already have. We can survive without having sex in a relationship. If women are saying what their standards are in a relationship or for a potential partner, it's up to men to decide whether or not they want to adhere to those standards or just accept the fact that they won't be in a relationship with a woman. And isn't it interesting how the turns have tabled? Men making the decisions for women, men telling women where their value should be placed. And now that women are actually saying what they're looking for, it's men that don't like it because they are losing control. Control that they should never have had in the first place. What baffles me is that men have a choice, believe it or not. They have a choice to better themselves. They have a choice to improve in certain aspects of their life, whether it's their personality or the things that they want to strive to be in the future. But instead, they'd rather still try and control women and tell them that their standards are ridiculous. And so if I was a man right now looking for a partner and these were my concerns, why won't you try and look inwards rather than trying to see what women should be doing differently? We also have to acknowledge that the conversation is very heavily on the way that men's genes won't be passed down. What about the woman's genes? Like, this surely can't be just a problem for men. If genes are going to get passed down, you need to be able to have a baby for your genes to be passed down. But of course, it has to be about men. It has to be about men's needs. It has to be about men's wants, and not necessarily how women are having much more freedom than they ever used to have, and men don't like it. The male loneliness epidemic, whether you believe it exists or not, there's enough men out there that thinks it does, is just natural selection. This is an extremely harmful conversation that was had about how they think that we need to find solutions and ways for men's genes to be passed on just purely because they think they're entitled to. And then trying to compare it to illnesses and diseases and saying that it's about mass extinction is literally just pushing the idea that women are there to be incubators. This type of conversation, unfortunately, screams control and entitlement.
Why do people demonize the patriarchy? And I'd be happy to explain that. So it's a lot less the concept of living in a patriarchy that's the problem, and a lot more what that effect has on real people. Let's set aside the fact that a male-dominated government will have male-dominated priorities, because that's a given. If we lived in a patriarchy where everyone was treated fairly, everyone was safe, everyone was able to thrive, then there'd be very little complaint about the situation. But in reality, we live in a patriarchy where women have to take daily precautions to avoid getting kidnapped or essayed or assaulted or drugged or whatever. Women are still paid less in the workplace. Women are still disrespected when they go into male-dominated job fields. Women are today fighting for basic bodily autonomy. Beauty standards, fat shaming, slut shaming. The list is long. Hey, Sai, well, what about the men? Men are forced into gender roles that encourage suppressing emotions. Men are pressured to be both the primary financial source as well as final decision maker, regardless of whether those are things that man is capable of doing. Men have a high self-checkout rate because they're expected to bear the brunt of suffering for their friends and family. All of this stuff is encouraged by the patriarchy. The society we have in place harms both men and women. That's why the
Want to know how I know the devil's a fucking man? Think about this. Every single man was created by a woman. Every man was brought into this world by a woman. No exceptions. Man's creator is a woman. And look how he treats her. Look how he treats her. In society, look how he treats her across the fucking board. Think about this. An entity, right, brings another entity into reality, into existence. And the thanks they get is being subjugated, oppressed, abused, trafficked. Like, what kind of fucking piece of shit entity does that to its creator?
Is it that you're so surprised by the Epstein files when you've watched male celebrities date teenagers, watched Catholic priests molest children and be protected by their institutions, and watched powerful men all over the world take child brides? The more patriarchal a culture is, the more we see the sexual exploitation of children, because the more a man craves domination, the more likely he is to choose a victim who can't fight back. But we hate that word too much. Patriarchy, it's a feminist conspiracy, right? And yet we watch the way that men abuse unchecked power on a loop, and you continue to be outraged by it, but refuse to deconstruct the system that enables it.
So, the patriarchy is like a man having his boot on a woman's neck. Feminism is women asking that the boot be removed. Men's rights activists think that having to take their boot off a woman's neck is some sort of reverse oppression. Conservatives figure that there was never a problem with the boot being on the neck until the woman started complaining about it, and if everybody would just shut the fuck up, things would be fine. Good guys take any complaint about the boot as a personal attack because not all men wear boots. Male allies try to discuss the issue in a way without alienating the boot. Women with internalized misogyny don't know why these other women are complaining about the boot on their neck. They love having the boot on their neck, and there's something wrong with the women who complain. Meanwhile, the boot stays on the fucking neck.
Hear that modern woman say, I want a man that's not afraid to cry. No, she doesn't. Nobody wants that guy. Nobody wants a weepy guy.
The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence toward women. Instead, patriarchy demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves.
The price that we are paying for unchecked patriarchy. Let me say this again. Pedophilia is the price we are all paying as a society for unchecked patriarchy, because it's the same system that said a woman is subordinate to me, a child is subordinate to me, and my sex is superior and an accessory to my masculinity. So therefore, the fulfillment of this desire is what validates my existence. And this is a dynamic duo. We overlook the fact that when man granted himself sovereignty, complete sovereignty over women, he also granted himself complete sovereignty over the body of a woman and a child. We overlooked how this ideology is actually oppressive to youth, because children are not taught to have dignity. They're not taught to be expressive, have opinions or emotions. They're only taught and expected to be submissive, just like the woman. You have to pay attention to the hierarchy. The man is sovereign, the woman is inferior, the child is inferior as well. But then again, the boy is superior, then the girl is inferior. And this opened the door even wider for little girls to be abused. Patriarchy really never had any accountability, so of course it's always the little girl's fault that she was sexualized as early as possible. This also means that younger men are not safe either, because male dominance doesn't discriminate, nor does it stop at women. That's just the start. Though the hierarchy says that the man is sovereign, the little boy is still within the child category, making him inferior to the adult male. Think about men at higher levels of authority abusing younger men. Think about the prison rape epidemic of the 80s and 90s that targets specifically younger men. But when you think about it, right, patriarchy never really told us that children were off limits. Because see, patriarchy and consent cannot go together. Morality and standards cannot exist within an ideology that was built off the objectification and hatred of an entire gender. An entitled mind never needs to ask for permission. The grandiose sense of importance needs no accountability whatsoever. This ideology is what perpetuates sexual crimes against young children. This ideology is what perpetuates grown men buying the OnlyFans of a young woman that just turned 18. This kind of thinking perpetuates child trafficking. This kind of thinking is what made that man go on the internet and say that if him and a collective group of men were stranded on an island with a 14-year-old girl, they will eventually abuse her. Furtherance of toxic male dominance is what upholds these atrocities, where patriarchy is you can expect pedophilia to be at the party right along with it. So instead of complaining about the trafficking, the allegations, the abuse, we know what needs to be healed first. Know that.
I was curious if you took away any commentary on patriarchy and war.
Men start wars, and the entire planet should be a matriarchy. But I've never changed position on that.
So that was, you already had that going into this.
Well, this was just a triple confirmation.
One of the great tricks of the patriarchy was to make men hate femininity. And so, Dr. Wally's study, I'm a clinical psychologist. And so the patriarchy is often viewed as this thing that's pro-men and anti-women. But really, it's harmful to everyone. And so let me talk about why. So the patriarchy made us think that things that have been societally viewed as feminine are bad and negative things. So then to participate in those things means you are bad or there's something negative occurring. And it's used as a tool of control, right? Because a lot of things like care and teaching and thoughtfulness and education and seeking higher education, more learning, assuming you don't know things from the beginning, those have been turned into like feminine qualities from a societal lens. And because of that, men to seek those things out are viewed in a negative light. And so they won't do it. And so then when they won't do it, they're not changing, they're not growing, they're not developing, which makes them easier to control from the context of a societal lens through the patriarchy. And the patriarchy, above anything, is a tool of control. Right? So these kind of systems are built up to make men hate women, hate femininity, and then anything that represents that is then negative or bad and needs to be stopped, or harm needs to come to it because it is against what we are taught is something that's supposed to be upheld. And so those kind of systems continually ingrain themselves, and that's how we see these cycles of harm and violence to men and women alike.
Every single man knows about how bad the patriarchy is, even if they don't want to admit it. And I can prove it, because if you ask any man across the entirety of the earth, would they like to be a woman for the rest of their life? They would say no. And why is that? They always say how easy it is to be a stay-at-home mom, how much of a privilege it is to be a stay-at-home mother. Why wouldn't you want to be a woman? It's because every man knows how hard it is to be a woman. Every man sees the burden of motherhood, the burden of being a stay-at-home wife, a homemaker, and they know that they don't want to do that because they see how hard it is. They see that they don't have the same rights as men do, because my rights don't change state to state. Women's do change state to state. For the most part, my rights don't really change country to country, but women's do. So men know the patriarchy exists. They just don't want to do anything to fix it because they're the privileged ones. They're the ones that are doing great in this system while women suffer. So to all the men that say the patriarchy doesn't exist, you're lying, because if I asked you if you wanted to be a woman, you would say no. Why is that? If it's so great being a woman, why don't you want to be one? It's because you know that they suffer in toil because of the patriarchy. And no country will ever be great until it gives women full equality. And what's crazy is you can literally see when a country gives women equal rights, that country does better. Year over year, they're happier, they're wealthier. The well-being of the entirety of the country goes up when you give women rights. You cannot say you care about equality if women are not equal to men. Thank you all so much for watching, and I appreciate your face.
A huge amount of men between the age of 15 and 50 will not pass on their genes.
We told women to choose better men, and when they couldn't find better men, they chose no one. What's the issue? It's almost as if there aren't enough better men.
Woke up super fucking emotional this morning, and I wanted to say that going through this unlearning, deconstructing journey, trying to deconstruct prescribed patriarchal masculinity and internalized misogyny is fucking heavy. It's fucking heavy. And there are days where it is just so overwhelming, you know? I'm 41 now, and you look back on a lifetime. You just look back on a lifetime of like a society that has just fucking imprinted on you so intensely and so deeply. And I like growing up in an authoritarian patriarchal household with a father that was incapable of accountability and having nowhere to put your emotions, nowhere to put your feelings, constantly being wrong about everything. And just like, I don't know, man, fucking trying to fit into society as a guy, you know, you gotta be tough. You gotta be strong. You gotta like sports. You gotta work out. You gotta drink beer. And it's like, it's all fucking bullshit. It's all bullshit. I wake up every day with a back, like I have a high school football injury on my back that has ruined my fucking quality of life. I struggle to pick up my kids. I struggle to play with my kids. I've been to the chiropractor fucking 300 times. I've seen a back surgeon. Like, I'm in pain every day because of some sport I didn't want to fucking play in the first place, you know? And like, I became an alcoholic from all of the shit I went through in childhood. My nervous system was so fucking dysregulated by the time I was a young teenager, young adult, that when I had my first drink, it fucking changed my life. It changed my life and I became a fucking alcoholic. I drank myself into the emergency room multiple times. Like, drinking has almost killed me multiple times. I was in rehab by the age of 25 and I've ruined every relationship I've ever been in. You know, I'm finally I've been with my wife 10 years now. Prior to that, I was incapable of being in a relationship. I didn't know it. I was never the problem. It was always someone else's fault. I was fucking undateable. And just like when you start down this path and you're doing it honestly and you're doing it in an authentic way, it's going to be fucking heavy. It's going to be heavy and it's going to hurt and you're going to question a lot of shit. You know? I love my dad, but that motherfucker. I care for the guys that I grew up with, but those motherfuckers, you know, like, I look at my son now. I have a 3-month-old baby boy.
Forget about the entertainment world. Isn't it just time? Isn't it just time for women to run the planet? I'm not just trying to placate you, I swear. But I don't know what else to do because we, men, we've been running the show since what, 10,000 BC? Something like that. And we're not doing so good. So, please, can you guys just take over? Can you? I think it's time. Sorry. I'm getting sidetracked.
So, just like men act like they don't know that they are privileged by the patriarchy, it's the same thing with racists and people who have white privilege. They'll act like they don't understand what's going on and they don't see it until something affects them personally. Like, I think that men are waking up to what's going on and the hurt that the patriarchy is causing everybody, because when Trump won for the third time and he started making all these laws against women, against women's bodies, women are losing their jobs. They're wanting women to stay at home, talking about sending women to marriage camps and all of that. Women started leaving their boyfriends and divorcing their husbands because of how bad it's getting. Women are divorcing because they're seeing that ICE has free reign to just take out anybody. They're building camps for kids, men, women, children, for everybody who doesn't agree with Trump. Like I said before, they're going straight Nazi Germany. Women are starting to divorce their husbands because the patriarchy lied and said that these men are going to be the ones who protect you. And no, nobody is protecting. Everybody is just sitting around watching this man do what he's doing. And the ones who aren't watching are just clueless and have their heads in the sand and are not paying attention to anything. And women are also getting disgusted by those men. I don't know what's more disgusting, the men who know and aren't even talking about it or worried about it, or the men who don't know, period, like, and don't care. Like, I don't know what's worse, but it's so many men who have no idea what's going on. But y'all, what's even worse is women around me that are acting like the men. They don't know, and the ones that do know aren't really concerned and don't care. And it's just like, okay, maybe it is like a chosen group of people who are going to, be woke, because everybody is not concerned about knowing. They just want to just go out in peace, I guess. But get down in the comments, ladies. Don't forget to hit that like, comment, and subscribe button to help the channel grow. And I will talk to you later. Bye.